Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome to our ongoing discussion on Bhagavad Gita. We are in chapter 4, titled Transcendental Knowledge. And last time we completed through verse number 18, which is one who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sort of activities. That's verse number 18 of 4th chapter, which we completed. So the most recent discussion, Krishna is elaborating on, he first starts with, how devotees or liberated souls in the past, having acted on the proper understanding of Krishna's transcendental nature, they achieved perfection, and therefore he's advising Arjuna to follow in the footsteps of those liberated devotees, right? So this was just a follow-up to the previous conversation, which Krishna was explaining how his birth and activities are divine, they are not ordinary, and he is not affected by his own work. That's why he is non-doer, though he is arranging for different systems like the 4 divisions of the human society, the 4 social orders are based on the occupational duties. And why is he's not affected? Well, he does not aspire to achieve anything, right? A conditioned soul, any kind of action that one takes up, one seeks to achieve something. For Krishna, he is the proprietor of everything. And so when he acts, he's not aspiring for a particular results. He has nothing to gain, he has nothing to lose. He's self-satisfied. And he does not go through any transformation as other conditioned living entities undergo anytime they take up a task, right? So if you want to take up a task, then generally there is an impetus for work, right? So I want to achieve something, and then in order to achieve something, I have to cultivate that desire, right? Then I will learn about how to make an endeavor to achieve it. And in the process, when I'm making those endeavors, I'm learning from my failures and I'm improving myself. And then after achieving the result, I'm validating if this is what I was anticipating, and then this would make me happy in this way. Does it fulfill that aspiration or not, right? And then validation might affirm that initial hypothesis or it might reject it. Everyone's experiences might be different. So throughout the whole process of trying to achieve something, and then once we achieve, when we try to enjoy it, there's a transformation that we undergo through, right? So Krishna does not have similar transformations. Of course, he's all knowing, right? So there's nothing that's out of his realm of knowledge. Neither he is trying to aspire or achieve anything. So in this way, he is not transformed. Okay. So we'll continue from where we left. We'll start from verse number 19. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjita jnanagni karmanam tammahu panditam buddhaha. One is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So this translation and the purport following it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So in this particular verse, Krishna is elaborating further on the concept of action in inaction and inaction in action. The basis of that prior discussion again was someone who is situated in knowledge, one who is seeing things as they are, tattvataha, as it is, right? So such a person is in full knowledge, who is able to see action in inaction and inaction in action. For such a person, every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification, right? So how does one come to this conclusion? Well, if you see the same discussion, right, from last time, how can one see action in inaction and inaction in action? The basis of this is that whether something is done with a desire for sense gratification or not, right? If it is not done with a desire for sense gratification, then it is inaction, regardless of uh, whether we are able to perceive that activity or not, right? Sometimes things are happening mentally, they're not happening on a gross platform, then it might appear as inaction. Uh, but in the mind, if one is still uh, meditating or brooding on trying to achieve something, um, that 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 aspiration could be still based on inaction. Hey, I don't want to stir things up. Best is that I do not act, right? So that is still a sense desire for sense gratification. Hey, it's troublesome. If I speak up or if I do anything, it might agitate others, right? Though I know this is the right thing to do, and so better I do not act, though it is my responsibility uh, that I should act. So in this way, one's endeavor for inaction is also, if it is based on sense desire for sense gratification, then actually it is action, though it might appear that person is not acting, right? And similarly, when a person is fully engaged, but is that person is acting not based on any fruitive motives, not desiring to enjoy something, but simply performing one's duty based on the prescribed duties of varna, right? Occupational duties or in devotional service to Krishna, not for one's own sense enjoyment. Then even if that person is acting, because that person is acting without any desire for sense gratification, that person does not that it does not really construe an action because there are no reactions to it. So because one has that understanding that the foundation of whether something is action or inaction is the desire for sense gratification, and one understands the flaws of sense gratification, because sense gratification is always temporary, and even when we indulge in it, it is mixed. It's not pure enjoyment. It's always mixed with some anxiety or with some trouble. Just like if you see birds or animals, whenever they're eating something, obviously any kind of act of eating is gratification. It's satisfying in any species of life. But the birds or animals, they're always in anxiety. They eat something, they will look left, right. Is anyone there? Is there a danger? Is someone going to attack me? So similarly, we also experience is somebody who is very wealthy. Um, when they're trying to enjoy the wealth, they're always worried. What should I do to keep my wealth secure? What if I'm attacked, I'm kidnapped, or somebody tries to extort money from me or cheat me? They are skeptical about their relatives because a rich man has a lot of friends and relatives. Everyone wants to be friend with them, and they're always evaluating, oh, is this person sincere? This person wants to have something, get something out of me. And so there is, in that enjoyment, though one may be blessed with wealth, there's always anxiety. People who are famous, we think, oh, if we have fame, it would be so nice. But then they have to deal with the paparazzis, and they cannot have a normal life. So in this way, the one having understood that the the flaws or drawbacks of sense gratification, one tries to achieve a higher purpose, right? And so that person is situated fully in knowledge and endeavors to be devoid of desire for sense gratification. That is what it says. And what's the outcome? Well, the sages say that for such a worker who is acting in perfect knowledge, devoid of desire for sense gratification, for such a person, reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So that person does not accrue any reactions. Just like, you know, if there is a blazing fire, it will consume any kind of fuel. It will burn the wood, right? If it is a coal, that means the coal is what? It's a partially burnt fuel. So you can still use coal. You ignite it, it will burn again. But wood that is fully consumed, it just turns into ashes. It does not remain as a coal. Similarly, this perfect knowledge is compared to such a fire, a blazing fire that can consume uh, all kind of reactions of work which is done devoid of sense desire. So that's the analogy. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness. Same concept, right? You know, it's a language when you speak that if you know the language you can understand, right? Similarly, person who is in Krishna consciousness can understand if another person is in Krishna consciousness, because externally that person might appear just like any other person, right? It might appear, well, hey, this person is just acting out of sense desire. Because I am acting out of sense desire, it appears to me that the other person is also acting out of sense desire, but I don't know what is going on in that person's mind, right? That person might be doing the same day job that I'm doing, but he's doing devoid of any sense desire, right? So it's difficult to evaluate. But person who is, we have this saying, Jaisi Drashti, Vaisi Srishti. So I can, if I am a Vishayi, a sense indulger, then even if somebody is a liberated person, that person will appear to me like a Vishayi, a sense enjoyer. But if somebody is situated properly, is Krishna conscious, uh, is situated in perfect knowledge, and when he looks at another person who might externally appear to do the same kind of activities and same engagement as any other person, but can see through that person and can see, oh no, this person is acting just like any other man, but is acting out of without any sense desire. How can that person see that? How can that person so perfectly recognize somebody who is situated properly? Because that individual is himself situated well. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is saying. Only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness. Others cannot recognize. Because the person in Krishna consciousness is devoid of all kinds of sense gratificatory propensities, it is to be understood that he has burned up the reactions of his work by perfect knowledge of his constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Jiveshu Ruphoy Krishnir Nityadas. The eternal constitutional position of the soul is to be subservient to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that service is not burdensome. It's not like that work extracted out of slave. It's pleasing, and we all have experiences of getting pleasure in serving those whom we love, right? Such a person is actually learned who has attained to such a perfection of knowledge. Development of this knowledge of eternal servitorship to the Lord is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn up all kind of reactions to work. So it's pretty straightforward. I'll take a pause to see if there are any questions or comments on this particular verse. Okay, move on to the next. Verse number 20. त्यक्त्वा कर्म फलासङ्गं नित्यतृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मणि अभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः. Translation: abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Karma phala asangam. Asangam is attachment. Karma phala is the results of one's activities. Nirashraya, without any shelter. That is independent. Srila Prabhupada translates as independent. So we'll talk a little bit about that word in detail. Abhipravrta is fully engaged. So here, all kind of undertakings does not refer to any kind of nonsensical activities against the prescribed injunction of the scriptures. All kind of undertakings means, at least in the conditioned state of life, it refers to the prescribed duties of one's varna. Of course, in liberated states, one might do something that might appear against the injunction of scriptures and still be perfectly situated, but that does not apply to us in our current situation. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions this freedom from bondage of action is possible only in Krishna consciousness when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. So one is acting without fruitive motives, right? He is abandoning all attachment to the results of his activity, even when one is planning, right? That I need to do something. When one is actually doing the activity, still one is not meditating necessarily in terms of what I will gain out of it. And then one actually gets the results, one offer the results in the service of the Lord, right? And if we are earning money, that money, when it is engaged, a portion of it in the service of the Lord, it becomes purified. Just like I was giving the example, one might make billions of dollars, but if that person is paying the due taxes, that is considered a clean income, or in India, what they call white, right? It is accepted. Otherwise, it is black money. It's subject to penalties, confiscation. So similarly, when we offer the results to the Lord, it doesn't have to be money necessarily. Like traditionally, the circulation of money was very limited, and a farmer would go grow grains, and he would barter with other necessities that one needs with a weaver or a goldsmith, blacksmith, potter, right? You name it. So it's a village economy, was mostly barter economy. But whatever one is producing, they would first offer it to the Lord in the service. So there would be deity in their home or a village temple, and then it's first offered uh, as a sacrifice for the enjoyment of the Lord. And in this way, their activity becomes free from any impurities, right? So such a person in acting in this way is ever satisfied. Because why is that person satisfied? Dissatisfaction comes when one aspires to achieve something and is not able to achieve it, right? And is frustrated. But when one is not acting on one's own accord, then there is no question of lamentation or frustration. And is independent. What does that mean? Well, here the actual word uses nirashraya. So most people, a conditioned living entity has to take shelter of something to be motivated. So And when we achieve what we aspire, we further indulge in it. So we take more shelter. So I might take shelter of my position, my power, my social status, my wealth, my beauty, my knowledge, and all this gives me, they're all desirable things in this world. It gives me some gratification, and that makes me move on. So I have taken shelter of all these things, which gives me the impetus to keep working to maintain my status or to achieve higher statuses, right? Um, and when if I lose it, what will happen? Well, I would be miserable, right? So the conditioned living entity is not independent. It takes shelter of all these things. But one who is situated in knowledge, one who is ever satisfied, is not attached to the results, that person is independent. Is not dependent. If one has fame, beauty, power, knowledge, then also one is not, one does not go, what do you call, one doesn't become proud of it. One says, okay, whatever by Krishna's blessings I have obtained these things, well, let me use it in the service of Krishna. So one doesn't get puffed up. So one needs to tolerate such benedictions or blessings that one might have. Well, what do you mean by tolerate? When we talk about tolerating, we generally talk about miseries of life when we do not have all these things and when we are miserable. Well, in order to tolerate the lack of all these things, first we need to tolerate when we have all these opulences. If we learn how to tolerate all the opulences, then we can automatically learn tolerating when we do not have them. They're two sides of the same coin. Attachment and renunciation, both are actually two extremes. If they're devoid of Krishna consciousness, one swings like a pendulum from far left to far right. Those people who renounce artificially are because they're frustrated when they do not have those things. And so, like, the grapes are sour, right? So that's a famous parable that we all know. It's not that, earlier, because the grape one is not, the fox was not able to get the grapes. That's why they appear sour. So such a kind of renunciation also exists. So to be ever satisfied, one needs to tolerate when all the opulences that one has. And when one person learns that, one can also learn, automatically will be able to tolerate when one is devoid of it. And one understands that, hey, in due course of time, I have achieved this. In due course of time, it will go away. There's no one in this world who can continuously maintain their status indefinitely. Civilizations rise up, they achieve, great heights, and then they degrade. There's a decline, and they collapse. Mm. Um, Even Brahma, the highest position is material world. His life is also limited. The demigods, especially Indra, is also always under the worry: what if the demons, the asuras, will take over the heavenly kingdoms, and which they have in many cases. You see, Bali Maharaj, he conquered over the heavenly planets, and that's why Vishnu had to appear as Vamana to reclaim it back. And so, any kind of position in this world is all temporary. So having understood the temporal nature of this world, a person is always ever satisfied with, and then uses whatever one has in the service of the Lord, and does not lament when one does not have it. So such a person is situated in knowledge, and is not implicated in any reactions. He's not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Of course, it's a very high state, but it automatically and naturally comes when one just understands the temporal nature of this world, and one acts on the platform, then automatically one learns how to be uh, dependent on the Lord. So independent here means not independent in absolute sense, but independent of material things which people are dependent on. Um, but on the other hand, a devotee is always dependent, dependent not on material things, but is dependent on the mercy of Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in the possessions. We talked about there. Those who have riches and opulences, they're always worried of how to protect it. So, of course, that doesn't mean a devotee would is wastes whatever blessings one has got, does not spend indiscriminately. That's not what it means. What it means is that one is not overly anxious that what I need to always worried what if it gets stolen, somebody cheats me, is always skeptical of things, and then one doesn't become a miser. So in this way, such a person is not anxious or disturbed in terms of trying to protect one's status. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is a sign of akarma, or action without fruitive reactions. This is as good as akarma. Akarma is inaction, one is not acting. And there is another thing called niskam karma. That means you're doing karma, but one is doing without any fruity motives, and one does not yield any reactions. So in that sense, it is as good as a karma, and that one is not acting. Right? So that's inaction in action. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before. So generally, vikarma means actions against the injunction of the scriptures, and karma means acting according to the prescribed duties of varna. But here there is a higher meaning to it, because even if one acts according to the prescribed duties of the varnas, but with the fruitive motives, then one is implicated in karmic reaction. It might be good reactions if one is executed piously, but they are still reactions. One is bound by this reaction. That means one will need to acquire another body to enjoy the results of those pious activities. So, in that sense, it's not different from vikarma or activities against the prescribed activities against the injunction of the scriptures. Such vikarma leads to bad reactions, but then one has to take body to suffer, right? Those reactions. So whether one has to enjoy or one has to suffer, one needs to acquire another body. And as soon as one acquires another body, there is birth, old age, disease, and death. And all of them are painful. So from a higher perspective, both good and bad karma can be, considered as vikarma. So that's a higher definition. One needs to arise above both of them. Any questions on the previous verse? Let me just make sure this was, yep, verse number 20. Okay, moving on to verse 21. निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्त सर्व परिग्रहः शारीरं केवलं कर्म कुर्वन्नाप्नोति किल्बिषम्. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus, working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So, how does such a person act? Well, one has to control mind and intelligence, because what happens is, if they're not controlled, the senses they overpower mind and intelligence, and senses are naturally attracted to sense objects. The eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue. They're naturally attracted to things which pleases them or gratifies them. And when the mind and intelligence does not control those senses, then the chariot of our body will be pulled in precarious situations and directions by the uncontrolled horse-like senses. Hmm. And the mind could be our biggest friend or could be our biggest enemy, and as we'll learn later in Bhagavad Gita. An uncontrolled mind is source of all kind of troubles. So man in perfect knowledge, understands this, and then acts to control the mind and intelligence. And he acts only for bare necessities of life. Now, what does this mean in the modern age? Bare necessities of life. See, the earlier there was no consumption economy, right? You did not have consumer goods. And so anywhere in the world that you go, you have almost pretty much the same standard of living, right? No matter what culture it is. I mean, one needs good housing. That housing doesn't need any, synthetic materials. You just use what's naturally available out in the nature. Well, there's some work done. You might have to saw the wood, if you're making a wooden home. But it is not ugra karma. Ugra karma means extremely industrious work. um, so with some minimal work, some handicrafts involved, in maybe polishing the wood or cutting the stones, but it's not ugra. It's not an extreme level as making synthetic wood or synthetic flooring or asbestos or any kind of other products that are used to make a house. So housing is one. The other is that shelter. Then you need some food. So most of the agriculture was all what you call for sustenance. It's not agribusiness. It's subsistence farming, not agribusiness kind of farming. And so that's why you didn't see. And then there's no complex transportation systems. I mean, people who used to still travel. You would have bullocks and you would have horses. You'd use other animals for traveling, but the traveling is very limited. Most people would not, go very far from where they were born, and there's no need for them to go also, like unless there is, entire civilizational collapse or extreme famine. Those were the only instances where people would move. Again, they won't go very far. Mm, some of them would travel for trade. But the point is, uh, the standard of living is same everywhere, and so there is no need for people to go from one location to another. Unlike in the modern world, what has happened is certain nations have exploited other nations to get labor, to get raw materials, and use that industrial enterprises to set up artificial living. The artificial living in the cities, in the modern cities, it's an artificial standard of living. The consumer goods and other, what we all call uh, the devices, the gadgets, the electronics. Mankind has lived without that for millions of years. So this artificial system has been created, which creates a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots. Mm. So earlier it was same standard of living pretty much all over the world, but now all this artificial standard of living through consumer goods and devices, when it creates the have and have-nots, and that could extend from between cities and villages in a country. It could extend uh, to beyond that into countries, where some countries we classify as developed, developing, underdeveloped, and then that actually spurs immigration. Mm. So again, it's a complex topic, but the point is, um, one can one can live on with bare necessities of life. In the modern world, bare necessities of life again means not asking to go to the farm. If you've never been a farmer, then trying to learn farming at this age would be very difficult, right? We don't have to make drastic changes to our life. But I don't need a Tesla or I don't need a Cadillac. One can, okay, I need a car for commuting, and let me get a car that fulfills the need of my my family, right? Can help me with basic commute, and I'm not acquiring it to just uh, as a symbol of status, right? So that's one example. We can apply to all other things that we have collected or want to have in our life. And so one can live simply. So the more things that we acquire, our homes become more cluttered, especially in the US. You see our garages are extension of our storerooms. You barely see cars inside the garages, but it's full with all kind of things that probably you don't need. Um, and once we have those things, what happens is then not only the money is spent in acquiring those things, now we have to maintain it. Uh, every now and then we might have to clean it or service it. We might not be using it, but we don't want to. Best thing is just sell it if we don't need it. First thing is to not even buy if we don't need it. But we tend to acquire things and things get cluttered. Then you have to clean up, and then there is anxiety associated with that. And then again, you have to spend time selling it or giving in donation. So it's just anartha. The same time could be used in reading Bhagavad Gita, right? Or chanting the holy names of the Lord. So in this way, one can spend more that time which is saved in spiritual perfection. So one man understands the higher purpose of the life. One acts towards achieving that higher goal, and then everything else becomes a lesser priority in life. So then one says, hey, I really don't need this. So one leaves with whatever the bare necessities can suffice in whatever situation one is. Thus, working is not affected by sinful reactions, right? So he has given up the sense of proprietorship over his possessions, understanding the temporal nature of it. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that Krishna conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. So one is not, overexcited that I'm going to get something really great out of this endeavor. And, one is not overly anxious. What if I fail? He says, this is my duty, I have to do it. Right? Whatever the case might be. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. So one considers oneself as a nimit matra, or an instrument for the higher purpose. When we are an instrument, the instrument itself has nothing to gain or to lose, right? Just like I might use a screwdriver to tighten a screw or unscrew it, and I might succeed or I might fail, right, in my endeavor, but the instrument is unaffected in either case. Similarly, when we see ourselves as an instrument, we don't have any personal successes or failures. There are many examples of this, like the soldier who goes to the war is not killing the enemy on one's own accord, but is engaging in that military warfare on the orders of a higher authority. And even if that person kills, many enemy soldiers, he has nothing to gain out of it. Of course, he might be recognized for his contributions, but such a person is acting out of one's devotion to the nation, out of patriotism, is not seeking to gain some fame. Why would one put one's life at stake? So, yes, the same principle could be applied in our prescribed duties as well, right? So we just think ourselves as an instrument, and then we, as an instrument, we are not personally affected. because we are not the proprietor. If we think ourselves as the proprietor, then we'll see, well, I succeeded or failed. Just like the screwdriver, it doesn't think, well, I am the proprietor of the object that is being built by tightening the screws. The screwdriver has no proprietorship over the object on which it is being worked upon. But the person who is operating the screwdriver has the proprietorship. And so that person might be frustrated. Hey, I've been trying this so hard for 1 hour or what. I can't unscrew this, right? By where the person has proprietorship and is trying to achieve something. So if we think ourselves as an instrument of the Supreme Lord, we act according to his plan, then we are not implicated, and we are not affected and implicated both. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. So the hand does not think, well, I am the proprietor of the object. Well, and hand itself does not decide when I should move and when I should not move. It just simply acts based on the motor control impulse that it receives from the brain at the volition of the living entity. So the hand just has no personal volition. So then hand is not implicated, it doesn't have any proprietorship. So similar consciousness we have to develop. See, a Krishna conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. Well, how do you know what is God's volition? Well, he has given prescribed duties in the scriptures. Through the scriptures, he is talking to us, and as we have to follow those injunctions. So then we don't have any personal volition. He moves exactly like a part of a machine, as a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance. So a Krishna conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action and transcendent loving service of the Lord. So why are the machine parts maintained and cleaned? Essentially to work, right? If we are cleaning and maintaining, but we're not operating the machine, then what's the point? And when we are operating, we're operating for the same purpose for which the machine was built. Similarly, our body is like a machine, which is also what we'll learn later in Bhagavad Gita. Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. Krishna says this body, the biological body, is like a yantra, a machine. Is made up of it's a machine that is made up of the modes of nature, my external potency. So this machine is provided to us. So if it's provided to us, then we have to go to the creator and find out why was this machine created. Like in factories, when they have so many machines, we use it for the intended purpose. If we try to use it for purposes that it is not intended for, then the results will be suboptimal. Or in some cases, it might not even produce any results if we are trying to achieve something else. Sometimes, machine could be repurposed for something else, as what we call jugaad, right, in India. There are different colorful terms in different parts of the world. So the jugaads are always suboptimal. So if this human body that we have achieved, we should know what the purpose is. And the purpose will be communicated by the creator in scriptures like Bhagavad Gita. And so if we use our body for that ultimate higher purpose, towards that goal, it needs maintenance. Right? If you don't maintain a machine properly, then it would degrade and expire before its natural life. The machine might be, hey, well, this machine should last 20 years, but if you don't take care of it, maybe it won't last even 10 years. Similarly, the human body, we have to keep it fit and maintain it because it's a property of Krishna. We are renting. We didn't create our own bodies. So the conditioned soul maintains the body so that I can enjoy sense gratification. We are also maintaining the body, but the purpose is different. Their purpose is maintaining the body for sense indulgence. A devotee, on the other hand, is also very diligent in maintaining and taking care of the body. But the consciousness is different. He says, well, this is Krishna's body. It's given to me so that I can achieve perfection in this rare human life and achieve the love of Godhead, uh, and be engaged in the service of the Lord. For that purpose, I should nicely maintain my body. So you see, the consciousness is different. Externally, it might appear, well, this person is also so much on a bodily platform, is spending so much time maintaining the body. But when the purpose is higher, then even the act of maintaining the body becomes transcendental. One is not implicated. Such a person is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. Just like there are many domestic animals which are domesticated, the horse or the elephants or the cows, the bulls, and they are engaged in the labor. The bull has no proprietorship over the land that the bull is tilling, or the grains that would be produced or yielded by the land once the crops are sown. Similarly, when there's this beautiful bhajan by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, one of the acharyas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And he identifies himself as a kukur, Krishna's dog, right? And just like a dog is very faithful to one's master and does not claim personal proprietorship, a devotee is also like that. Just like the dog has how do you know? Well, this dog is not a stray dog and has a master. There's a belt around the neck of the dog, and then there might be a license number or the name of the owner. But as a stray dog, it would be impounded, right? Similarly, the devotees, they also have kanthimala. It's like the belt, uh, which indicates that one is a servant of the Lord. So a self-realized soul does not have any proprietorship even over one's own body, in the sense that one is not acting out of one's own accord, but is acting according to the will of the Lord. And it's not like a slave mentality, because one understands that my self-interest, of course, there is self-interest, but my self-interest is best served when the interest of the Lord is served, and when my relation is revived, which I have forgotten. Just like the child does not have any personal proprietorship, is dependent on the parents, right? And so, as long as the child takes shelter of one's parents, the child is blessed, grows nicely, learns, receives good education, all his desires are satisfied. But if the child revolts, I don't need you, I'll figure out things on my own, then the child is bewildered. You don't achieve anything in one's life. So similarly, we are all children of the Lord, uh, and our will is best served when the will of Krishna is served. Just like the roots of a plant, when they are watered, the entire plant is nourished. But if the leaves and the twigs and flowers and fruits, they say, let me withhold the water, I'll I'll directly consume water. That's not possible. The root has to be watered. Similarly, if the hand or the arms and the limbs, they say, well, we'll consume the food directly. I'm not going to feed the stomach. I'm not going to feed the mouth. The hand revolves. I'll directly consume the food. That's not possible. The hand has to feed the mouth. The hand has to feed the stomach. The body is nourished and the hand will be automatically nourished. So Krishna tusta jagat tustam, right? Krishna tuste jagat tustam. When Krishna is satisfied, everyone else is satisfied. Just like the pastime of Durvasa Muni when he was sent by Duryodhan to the Pandavas in order to take a revenge. Because Duryodhan knew that Durvasa Muni, if he gets angry, he will curse the Pandavas. And he had, 60,000 disciples. He said, well, Pandavas are staying in the forest, such and such location. You should go and visit them. And, Durvasa visits them. He says, well, we're going to take a bath in the river. We'll come back, arrange for meal for he and his 60,000 disciples. So Pandavas are living in the forest. They don't have any uh, uh, paraphernalia or other conveyances to cook such a large amount of meal. But Draupadi was blessed with an Akshay Patra, which would cook unlimited meal, but only does once a day. And she had already used. They just had their meal, so they didn't have. She cannot use it for the same day. Anyway, one grain of rice was left in the pot, and Krishna knew what's going on, so he arrives over there. And then Draupadi says, "Well, you are our guest. We should honor you. Unfortunately, we don't have much left, but only this little grain of rice is left." And Krishna eats, and, and he is satisfied because he is satisfied simply by love. And he's always seeking for love. He does not need any food. And as soon as Krishna is satisfied, at the same time, the Durvasa Muni, having taken his bath in the river, and all his disciples suddenly felt. Earlier they were starving out of hunger, but now they felt that somehow their hunger is quenched, satisfied. He says, "Now if I go to Yudhishthira, how I'm going to eat anything?" So he does not even show up. So it's another story or pastime which suggests is elaborated on the same principle. Krishna is satisfied, everyone is satisfied. A cruel proprietor of an animal kills the animal in its possession, yet the animal does not protest. So this is an extreme example, right? Of course, Krishna is not cruel. He's not exploiting us. So that does not apply. But the point is that a devotee is surrendered to the same extent. One can learn even from those animals, and they did not protest when they are abused by their owners. So if we cultivate similar level of surrender, of course, we don't have to worry about abuse. Krishna is benevolent. And Krishna takes care of everything. Nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna conscious person fully engaged in self-realization has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and the soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. Even according to Niti Shastra, money that is acquired by unfair means does not last long. And when one loses that, one loses more than what one has acquired. 10 times or so in the course of time, one will lose more even than what one has acquired if it's acquired by unfair means. So, according to Niti Shastra, also there are 3 things that one should always be satisfied with. There are 3 things that one should never be satisfied with. This is from Chanakya Niti. 3 things that one should always be satisfied is food that is available on one's without much personal endeavor. Of course, that doesn't mean we don't have to earn, but even in our daily life, sometimes we see that we might be sometimes there's some nice meal that is cooked, sometimes it is not. Sometimes a little salty, sometimes sour, sometimes might be in a situation or a place where we might not have a timely meal. We might have to skip a meal, but the person should always be satisfied and not disturbed by the unpredictability in terms of getting one's meal. Similarly, one should be satisfied with one's wife, whether one's wife is favorable or if she's unfavorable. One should not get agitated or disturbed in either scenarios. So one should just remain happy in whatever situation one is. Third thing that one should always be satisfied is money which is acquired by fair means, honest means. In order to accumulate more wealth, one should not resort to unfair means. There are 3 things one should always be satisfied with. And what are the 3 things that one should never be satisfied with, according to Chanakya Pandit? Of course, Chanakya Pandit did not compile things out of his own accord. He compiled different learnings from different scriptures, put it together. So three things that one should never be satisfied is charity. First is charity. So no matter how much charity we do, we should never think that, oh, I've done enough charity, that there's no need for me to do more. Of course, one should do charity based on one's personal situation. Of course, one has to maintain one's family, and so not suggesting one should give up everything in charity, but there could be a certain budget that one allocates for charity. And if one, by Krishna's grace, if one acquires more wealth, then one can increase that. And so one, in that sense, one aspires to be more charitable. The second thing one should never be satisfied at is study of scriptures. So, well, I have studied this particular scripture, I've studied Bhagavad Gita, so I'm satisfied now. There's no need for me to study more. So that's not a good attitude. No matter how much all our life should be engaged in Shastra Adhyayan, because the scriptures, they come directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we study the scriptures not to gain academic scholarship or to be known as the knower of the Vedas or very learned, not to acquire any false prestige, but learning the scriptures so that we can apply those learnings in our life. We can understand Krishna better. We can relate to him by studying his instruction. Like later in Bhagavad Gita, toward the end, Krishna concludes that one who studies this great conversation between us, he's referring to the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. One who studies this is actually worshipping me through one's intelligence. This is what I consider. Krishna is saying, whoever is studying Bhagavad Gita, I consider that person is actually worshipping me through one's intelligence, right? So, so in that mode of worship, one should not become satisfied that I have studied enough. There is no need for me to study. And the third thing that one should never satisfied be is with japa, or the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, especially in the beads. Well, I have done, I have chanted enough holy names, and I should not chant any more. So the holy names of the Lord are very powerful. They are non-different from Him, and one can achieve spiritual realization, especially in the age of Kali, just by chanting his names. And that's why you see the similar practice in all the religious traditions of the world. The Christians, they have the rosary beads. They chant on them. They say, "Hallow Thy name" is an injunction from biblical scriptures. You will see Muslims, they carry beads, they chant the names of Allah. The Buddhists, they have beads, right? So no matter what religion you take up, there's emphasis on chanting the holy names of the Lord. In this way, these are the three things that one should never be satisfied with. So coming back to the point, yeah, for maintaining the body and the soul, one does not require, but he should not acquire things by unfair means. He does not therefore become contaminated by such material desires and material sins. He is free from all the reactions of his actions. Okay, so this is sum and substance on this particular verse. Any questions on verse number 21? Okay, moving on, verse number 22. यदृच्छालाभसन्तुष्टो द्वन्द्वातीतो विमत्सरः समः सिद्धाव सिद्धौ च कृत्वापि न निबध्यते. Translation: He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality, does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. This is again the elaboration on similar idea, that one who is satisfied with gain which comes on its own accord. So, there's a particular animal which practices this in terms of catching one's prey. Does anyone know? You find this reference a lot in the scriptures. And this vritti is referred to by the name of that animal. Does anyone happen to know this? It's called Ajagar vritti. Right? In Hindi or other languages, we say Ajgar. Ajgar is a python. So Ajagar vritti, it is advised that humans, self-satisfied person, acts according to Ajagar vritti. So Ajagar vritti, if you how does a python? Python does not travel long distances to get one's prey. It's generally in a swampy place, right, which is thick with bushes, or there's water around, and it does not go very far from one's location. And then when an animal comes by nearby, what does it do? It attacks and winds that animal and completely twists and breaks its bones and then consumes it. And then you would be and then that the python is satisfied and does not go anywhere. Another animal might come after 30 days, 40 days, whenever, and it is satisfied. So in this way, we should also not over endeavor to acquire a lot of things. Some endeavor is there in order to maintain our life, maintain our body, but there's a law of diminishing returns. You know, 80% of the things can be achieved by 20% of effort, and the remaining 20% of the things might require 80% of the effort. And so that achieving that extra 20%, is superfluous. It's not going to help us much more. And so the same time and energy that we save would be used for spiritual purposes. So we should not extra endeavor. We should be satisfied with what comes out of its own accord. Such a person is free from duality, dvandva. This world is full of dualities: heat and cold, success and failures. Anything that you see in this world is full of dualities. So one needs to overcome this. And how, mostly people are affected by failures. They think successes, they are happy, but happy means also they are affected in the sense that they become puffed up or overjoyous. Now what happens is when one gets super excited or super elated, when that things goes away, they become super miserable. Right? It's like a roller coaster ride. The higher you go up, the more you will fall down. If you just look, the waves, if you study wave theory in school physics, if you look at the amplitude of the wave, it has a certain height. Now the same height you will see on the trough, which is the downward going path of the wave. So the crest and the trough. The crest is what goes up. The trough is that goes down. The amplitude is same. If you take a sinusoidal waveform, right, a sine wave, you might, in kind of experiments you might have done in high school or college, we see like a sine curve. The amplitude is same. So when our amplitude of elation is so high, I'm not saying the amplitude of success should not be high. Could be, the successes and failures come on their own accord. Of course, there is some endeavor involved, but there are 5 factors which I have mentioned in the past, and it will again be, will come in, we'll go over that discussion when Krishna actually explains those 5 factors of success. There are factors which are out of our control. There are factors which are structural that we inherited or we are put into because of our past pious activities from a previous life. And there are factors which are completely out of our controls. So these 5 factors together, they are responsible for success, and we might get success, and we should do our endeavor and in the best possible way, because we are seeking to engage the results in service of Krishna. So from that perspective, we should strive for success. As of course, Arjuna is not, when he fights, he says, I don't care whether I fail or succeed. At one level, that's true, but he's still attempting to succeed, not for one's own accord, but so that when he's successful, he wants to be successful for Krishna. So there is subtle difference. But when because he wants that success not for his own self, when one is subject to failure, he is not lamenting, right? So as to the extent that one seeks personal enjoyment in case of success, to that extent one laments. So the crest and the trough, they are of the same amplitude. So one has to be, if one learns how to be steady in success, only such persons can learn how to be steady in case of failures. So duality, we have to overcome duality. We don't have to overcome just the lamentation of failures. That would never be possible. No one has been able to do that independently. The two sides of the same coin go together with the coin. If you learn how to tolerate successes, you'll automatically learn how to tolerate failures. So it's an important point one have to understand. Again, that one doesn't become lackadaisical. What is lackadaisical? That means you know, careless. Okay, I have overcome the dualities of success and failure, so I'm careless in execution of my duty. That's not what it means. When one executes one's duty diligently, makes the best possible endeavor for success, but that success is not for personal accord. Just like the soldier who is fighting is not careless. I don't, let me not be so diligent in fighting. I don't care whether I succeed or fail. Well, that's not the attitude. It's still fighting with the putting the one's best step forward, but is not fighting for one's own accord. That's the difference. So such a person is never entangled all the performing actions. Okay. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that a Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body, is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord, neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his own power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. Right? The modern injunction is beg, borrow, steal, make it happen. Of course, begging is allowed for brahmanas. Um, the real brahmanas in the past, they would beg for two purposes. One is so they don't endeavor too much effort in maintaining their body, rather use the time for spiritual cultivation. And then that's also an opportunity when they go to beg. There are stringent criteria. They would decide, well, I'm not going to go more than 5 houses. Sannyasis actually do that. Those who are in renounced order of life. And if they don't get anything from the 5 houses, then they don't make another endeavor. So they have strict rules that they might have imposed on themselves. And when they go for begging, they give them spiritual guidance. We don't have any personal experience of this, but based on description of scriptures, the sadhu, when he is begging alms, he generally provides spiritual instructions in return for the benefit of the householder. So it's not referring to that kind of begging. Here, the begging which is being referred to is the begging just to achieve a purpose. We are trying to, we try to do something, we are not able to do it, then we might ask someone to, please, can you give us? If that doesn't work, then we might plead even more. Oh, no, I really need this. What could be a good example? All of us probably have some sort of experience doing this. Where maybe when we are really desperate, we go out and seek something, but this is again for our own personal gratification, right? And sometimes people take to theory, beg, borrow, steal. Um, Again, so those are all unhonest means to maintain oneself. So yeah, one has to be satisfied. He's therefore independent in his livelihood. He's not dependent. So out of the four varnas, The only varna which is dependent on someone else for livelihood is the Sudras. Sudras, they are maintained by others. Vaishya is self-maintained. Vaishya engages in trading. He might have successes or failures in business, but he does not is not dependent on a salary. A Vaishya also refers to a farmer or a businessman or a trader. The farmers, they grow their own food, so they're not dependent on anyone. A Kshatriya collects taxes. Of course, the tax is not simply for personal enjoyment, but the taxes um, are used for public service. And especially in the past, a significant portion of the taxes would go for performing yagyas, because by performance of yagyas, Krishna is satisfied, Vishnu is satisfied, the demigods are satisfied, and the demigods bless us with rain, as we discussed earlier. Was it the third chapter? Annad bhavanti bhutani. अन्नाद भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्याद अन्न संभव यज्ञाद भवति पर्जन्यो यज्ञ कर्म samudbhavam. So living entities subsist on grains. Grains, they are grown by rainfall, and the rainfall we cannot control. Uh, I mean, you can say I have irrigation, put some irrigation system, but that is not sustainable long term. Mostly civilizations end up, over straining the water resources. The rivers then eventually run dry. Like 100 years ago, the mighty Colorado River was untamable. They deemed it untamable. And then they built a Hoover Dam just outside of Las Vegas. And now the Colorado Lake Mead, which is the largest reservoir that was created, is the lowest level in terms of the water level, right? And so now they are declaring drought. Starting next year, they might be start putting water cuts, which is unheard of in the US. All the cities in the Southwest, San Diego, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Las Vegas, doesn't have a bright future. They will all have to be completely abandoned. But yeah, so that irrigation is not sustainable in the long term. So the only sustainable thing is the rainfall, and the rainfall is controlled by the demigods. Indra is the demigod of the rain, and the demigods are satisfied by the sacrifices. They are secondary enjoyers. Krishna is the original enjoyer. So we are not independent in our livelihood. So I was talking about, yeah, Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas used to perform this fire sacrifice. Look at King Janaka or Rama every day in the morning, even Krishna. One of their duties is to just perform sacrifices so that their kingdom is blessed by these benedictions from the Supreme Lord. So, of course, those elaborate yagyas are not possible in the present age, but later in this chapter, we will learn different kind of yagyas apart from fire sacrifices. The yagyas that brahmachari can engage in, a grihastha, a vanprastha. So the fire and the substances offered in the fire will change. The yagya and the dravya which is offered in the yagya will change. One example is you can offer the sense objects in the fire of sense control. So that also becomes yagya. Of course, in Kali Yuga, the best yagya is Harinam Sankirtan, chanting the holy names of the Lord. Because the elaborate yagyas where a lot of paraphernalia are offered is not possible so much in Kali Yuga. So anyway, Kshatriyas are engaged in sacrifice, and the Brahmanas are simply, they don't have, they depend on charity, receiving charity. So the see, only the labor class, right, is dependent on livelihood or dependent on others for one's salary. Others are not. And even that labor class, if you see, Sudras, they are maintained for life by their master. Right? They don't have to worry about getting fired or losing the job. And the master similarly is not maintaining the laborer just for acquiring a false sense of prestige. See, I have so many servants, and I'm maintaining them, doesn't become proud, or it does not reject them when they become incapacitated in their old age. That is the standard. Mhm. So in that sense, also they are maintained by a master, but then again, there is no anxiety. Who's going to take care of me? I should invest in my pension plan, like that. So that was the original standard. We can't even imagine in the present age anything close to that. Mm. But one can transcend whether one is in a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or a Sudra. One can rise beyond that, and when one is actually becomes a devotee, and one can become a devotee or a Vaishnava even as a Sudra. It's not only Brahmanas or Vaishnavas. Mm. And so Vaishnava means one who is a surrendered devotee of the Lord. And in any social status, one can become a devotee. And when one is dependent on the Lord, then doesn't matter what one's varna is. Yeah, he is independent in that sense. He's just looking for things that come on its own accord. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. What is this reference? He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the world. So, uh, looks like it's referring to a situation where there is some conflict of interest, where somebody's action might create some sort of hindrance for our own action, but one uh, somehow finds a way out of it. One tolerates it, but one does not. If one is dedicated to one's service to Krishna, then one does not allow oneself to be affected by that. Mm. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action. Yeah. And similarly, the one mostly sticks to one's prescribed duties. And within that constraint, one is engaged in the service of the Lord. If needed, one can go beyond the prescribed duties of one's varna or even take up somebody else's service. I think that's what it's referring to. Um, so there are two possibilities. One is most of the time, the one is engaged in one's own prescribed duties. Sometimes one might take up somebody else's prescribed duties if needed. If that is what's needed to serve the Lord, he is not does not put over emphasis on following rules. Niyama agraha. Well, the niyam is this is my varna. I'm going to only follow my duties. This is not my duty, right? Just like in corporation offices, we go and then we say that, hey, this can you help me get this done? Well, this is not my job. Ask such and such person. Mm. Which in general is a good, most of the time it is the right way to do, because there's efficiencies in terms of division of labor, and we have our own priorities. But when there is need of the hour for us to jump in and fill in for someone else, though that it might not be the domain, we do that. All of that have that experience also. Same thing. And most of the time we are serving Krishna within this scope or the sphere of our own prescribed duties according to our nature. But if needed, we are not bound by it. For the service of the Lord, we can transgress that. Similarly, on the other extreme, somebody else, when they uh, somebody else's service might have some conflict of interest with our service, and it might jeopardize the our service to Krishna, but one does not let that happen, right? So then both ways, somebody else uh, affecting us, or we taking up somebody else's activity. So the duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. So that's the sum and substance of this particular verse. I think we are about time. I'll take a pause and invite any questions or comments on this particular verse or today's class in general. Anyone?
Good discussion, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
I was just saying it was good discussion today. I mean, more of you saying, but good content.
Yeah, there's a lot of details to this. Krishna elaborates, the same thing will continue. Um, though the overall topic will change in chapter 5, which is more action in Krishna consciousness, and 6th is more dhyana yoga, but similar themes or concept will come across with much more detail from a slightly different perspective.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, every time we read this, we get more meanings out of this, more realizations. But yeah, this is an attitude we have to make an endeavor to cultivate, to be not be disturbed by dualities. It's a it's a primary foundation in our spiritual realization. And it comes with knowledge. It's not artificial. Many times people ask questions which are very genuine questions. Well, how exactly you do it? What do you mean I have to act without any um, desire for results? It doesn't make logical sense, which is a good question. So it's not simply telling that one has to do it, but we have to explain, well, how can one do that? Well, by cultivating knowledge, there is a knowledge, just like it says that, how can one cultivate indifference towards acquiring wealth? Well, if one spends time understanding the drawbacks of acquiring too much wealth, then automatically one can slowly cultivate renunciation, right? So everything can be learned. Everything is a systematic science. Uh, I, people think, well, just like some people say, well, I am not a good musician. I don't have a good, vocal cord, or I don't have a good musical sense. And for a long time, I used to think that, and say, well, somebody is blessed with musical capabilities, and such persons can only be musicians. Well, it's true. Well, somebody could be blessed with such capabilities from previous life, and they could be fast learners, but anyone can learn. If I don't carry that from my previous life, I can love. It's like just like learning language.
Yes,
And
Prabhuji.
then as I spend time, how harmonium is taught, or mridanga, and as I spend time teaching my son, I say this is not any difference from any other language that I learn. Music is a language. First you learn the letters or the alphabets of the language, then you start joining those alphabets into words, and the words turn into sentences, and sentences turn into paragraphs and chapters and entire book, right? So there is a systematic way one can learn language. Similarly, music also a language, which I never had that realization in my childhood, where there are in case of it could be 7 notes sargam, right? You can combine that into words. Similarly, you playing mridanga, then you have titta, tere, kheta, kika, like specific syllables, and then you combine them, and the rules in which what can be combined, what cannot be combined, just like you have rules around how consonants and vowels are combined. And then you build muscle memory in playing those syllables, right? And then
Yes.
stamina, and then you compose different melodies, right? So it can be taught systematically. Similarly, all these things like this person is so renounced, I am not, I'm not made for this. There's nothing like that, right? Similar spiritual realization, renunciation, acquiring a certain kind of behavior or perspective, all of us can learn it. It's just that it's never been scientifically presented, but there are a sequence of logical steps and progression. And if we follow in that structured way, anyone can do it. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna. Many in the past have achieved this. You can also achieve it. So, by reading scriptures in detail, we can understand the nuances. We cultivate the knowledge how things are working. What is the perspective of someone who has overcome duality? How does such a person perceive the world? How does one achieve that kind of perspective? What are the logical steps? And by learning about that, we can first get theoretical knowledge. Again, knowledge also is at 4 stages. One is just hearing first, then retaining it. That is the second part.
Mm.
Hearing, We are here, but if we don't retain, but then over a period of time we'll start retaining. But we don't know how to apply. Then we learn how to apply. Okay, I'm in this situation. I heard this. Does it make sense? We try to validate it. Oh, it makes sense. It does not make sense. Well, why this is not making sense here, but it's making sense there? And you go and ask questions. You get clarification. Oh, now I know. Okay, then there is an exception or another nuance to it. And then we start applying in our real life. And so suppose we are overcome by the dualities, but because I've heard Bhagavad Gita class, now I go and apply it. Initially, it might take 1 week before I start applying it. And even if I apply, it does not retain for a long time. That means I'm not disturbed for a moment, but the next moment again I'm disturbed. Then I have to again apply the same knowledge. Right? But slowly you will start closing the gaps. Earlier I was disturbed for 1 week, now I'm only disturbed for a few days. Now I'm disturbed only for a few hours. And then I'm disturbed only for a few minutes. Then I'm disturbed only for a few seconds. And then it becomes your second nature. Right? When it becomes a second nature, you don't even have to act. You don't have to make an endeavor to apply it. Just like a mridanga player, earlier when he's learning, he has to apply the theory. First, he has to hear the theory, then retain, then he has to apply. Whatever. But then it just becomes so natural. He doesn't even know. In a good mridanga player, over a period of time, they might even forget the mantras that they had learned originally. And when you ask what mantra are you playing, it's like I don't know. It's just I'm playing organically. So the progression happens from a sensual level to mental level to intellectual level to the ego level, because these are the four coverings of our body. So first we have to hear, that is at a sensual level. Then we have to retain it in our memory, that is at a my level of a mind. Then we start applying it, that is at the level of intelligence. And by repeated application of a period of time, it becomes your second nature, that is at the level of ego. So the knowledge, that jnana to vijnana, jnana is theoretical knowledge, vijnana is self-realized knowledge. So jnana, you might say, is at a mental level. Somebody might be able to quote. And when it becomes our second nature at the level of ego, that is vijnana or self-realized knowledge, but it has to go through these 4 layers. Anything and everything could be systematically taught, including spirituality. And we can cultivate the same attitude or transcendental vision as a self-realized souls. It's not something that is so alien that no one can achieve it. That's all I would like to say.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, at one point you had talked
Right.
about how for every idea uh, or everything that we can see around us, there is a thought. There's always a thought in our mind. There was some discussion about how science and Vedic knowledge uh, go in a totally different, uh, you know, approach
Yeah.
towards that. And you had a presentation that you had shared. Can you share it with the group, Prabhuji?
You mean like the PowerPoint presentation, or you want
Yes,
me to
Prabhuji.
talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you can send the link or something, Prabhu.
Yeah. I'll share that link. Yeah, the idea is, see, the knowledge or the concepts, actually, they exist a priori in the mind.
Yeah.
That's the basic principle. And I've elaborated on that in the past. I think that's the present. And yeah, I'm happy to share that presentation. Just like the example that, if when you're teaching a small child in a picture book, well, this is a dog, and there is a particular species of dog whose picture is there. And then you might say, well, the dog barks like this. And then, you show a real dog or a video of it, like barks like this, moves like this. The next time the child sees another dog of a completely different species, right? You see, that's a dog. He's looking at that species for the first time, at least in that particular body, right? In this particular birth. And then he sees another dog of a different species, he immediately recognizes a dog. It does not say, well, this is a cat. So what we have taught that child is just a name. So there are three different things. There is a concept. There is a name for that concept. That name could be different in different languages, but the concept is there. Like the idea of something that we sit on, we call it chair, or you call it kursi, or whatever you call it, right? That's a name which is assigned to the idea that something that you sit on. That's a concept. So the concepts are already there in the mind. when they are learning the language, you're just ascribing a name to it. Now you're teaching the child this concept which is already in its mind. You don't know, but we know. The thing is, the concept is already in the mind. We are just giving a name and telling the child, well, this is a name, right? And there is the actual object, which is a dog. So there is the idea of a dog, right? And then there is a name, dog or kukur or kutta, or well, so many could be different names in different languages. And then, so there is a name for the idea, and there is the actual object. You see, there are three different things. So, the Vedic scriptures say that the concepts, they are pre-existing in the mind. Otherwise, how is that child is able to identify, the species which he has never seen? Or if you show a child, this is a pebble, a rock. Now the pebble could come in different shapes and sizes and different colors. And no, you don't have to tell the child every single time, well, this is a pebble, this is a pebble, this is a pebble, it's a different size, different color. So you showed it independently, now appears in a group. You go to the riverbed here in Snoqualmie, you go, right? And you take with shore here, small. In the riverbed, there are so many stones and pebbles. I don't know, tell him, he knows this is stones. Now they are in a group and they are arranged in a particular fashion. So the idea already existed. All those concepts are there. That's why the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. For a computer, you need to program things. Artificial intelligence doesn't develop on its own. A human has to program it, right? So, but the mind is amazing. It has everything that it's already there. All concepts are already there. So yeah, it's a you can go on this for hours. It's a long, much more deeper subject of how we learn things and how the mind acts. And yeah, I'll share that presentation. We can have another discussion at an appropriate time. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll conclude today's class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.